Serious Redditors, who had arranged marriage, was sex awkward initially? How did you break the ice? I met my husband 3 months before my wedding. We went on a few dates before the wedding. How was the wedding night? Pretty nice. Since we'd both come directly from the wedding, we needed to shower. He took a shower first. Then I did. It was about 2 a.m. before we finally got started. It wasn't awkward at all. A bit painful, but not really awkward. First orgasm came a few days later on a train in France for our honeymoon. 20 years later, we've got a house full of children to prove that the sex has been both enjoyable and plentiful. My parents and aunt arranged a marriage for me and I traveled back to my country. Met her once before the marriage. First night she was really shy and kept hiding under the blanket and pulling it away from me while giggling. Nothing happened that night. Then she got a call the next day from her mother and they kept talking for half an hour. It happened then later that night when we were in bed innocently watching TV. Then she looked at me and said maybe the first complete sentence. I don't know what I'm supposed to do in a nervous voice. So I laughed and played it funny. Then started gently kissing, hugging, and joked a bit. Then 2 hours later we are doing it and now I've 2 kids from her and she turned 26 last month. Arranged isn't as bad as it sounds. But back in my place it's normal to have arranged marriages and even marriages without seeing the bride. Mine was great considering there are parents who wait outside the room to her the daughter orgasm to make sure she's virgin. I have an amazing story regarding this, but I may be too late to the party. Warning. Wall of text. This all happened April last year, and it is 100% true. My wife is from a Muslim country originally, but her family is from the capital and quite modern. She has relatives however from a smaller village who are not quite as modern. So one of her second cousins, son of dad's cousin, wants to get married because it is time already and he wants children. His mom interviews a few girls but it took a while. Some of the girls she didn't like because they weren't traditional enough. And some of the girls' families didn't want because the guy's family was too strict. Even for a small village, things like the girl having to be Muslim, must wear hijab, pray 5 times a day, the whole ordeal. Finally they find a girl who suits him. His mom approves and girl's parents approve. So they organize the wedding for like 2 weeks after. Sadly because of that I couldn't go. We live in Western Europe and I need to tell my vacation days in advance. At least more than 2 weeks. But she could arrange it with her work to go for the wedding. My wife told me about the wedding. It was super traditional Muslim wedding, which I would have loved to see because I have never been to one. Although it was hard for me to understand a wedding without any alcohol. So the wedding happens and it ends early and everyone goes home to rest and sleep. My wife and his family, parents and sister, go to the hotel which is an hour away. Then my wife's dad gets a call. I should say before that my wife's dad is very well considered in his extended family because he has a very good job in the center and works with high-profile people. Basically a very respectable man. It was maybe 1 a.m. and he gets a call from his older sister saying that he needs to go back to the village immediately. There is an emergency. Him expecting it to be about money, he gets asked for money quite often, demands to know what is going on. So here is fun part. The groom was a very traditional Muslim man. He had never had a date, never gone out with a girl, and followed his religion in a very strict way. He had barely talked to women in the past. The bride has followed a similar path. So they finish the ceremony. They go to the room, and they realize they have absolutely no idea how to proceed. Like these people did not know how to have sex. They had never watched a porn film. They never had sex education. No one thought to tell them what they would have to do in bed. They are there wondering what to do now. So they call this aunt, who is the eldest of the family, to tell them what to do. But the aunt feels that a woman cannot possibly describe to a man how to have sex. That is so inappropriate. So instead she calls her younger brother, my father-in-law. My Phil doesn't want to hear about that crap. He is 1 hour away and it is really barely any of his business. It is late and he works the next day. Also there must be many others more suitable for that kind of thing. At this point my wife and her mom and sister are cracking up because they cannot believe this is happening on 2013. And the thing is, no one expected this, otherwise they would have taken precautions. So my Phil tells them to try to find someone else and if not he will go. But thankfully they contact one of the guests who is a mullah, not sure I spelled that right, like a religious figure, who agrees to go and explain to the guy what to do with his wife so they they can consummate the marriage. But it doesn't end there. Like a week later my wife comes and tells me that apparently something happened, because the next days the bride was seen walking funny, and apparently they had to contact a gynecologist because something had happened during the wedding night that actually hurt the poor girl. We never got to know what was it that he did or they tried that went wrong, or the outcome after. Keep in mind this is really embarrassing for them, so they tried to keep it as low as possible. We only found out because they called my Phil first to try to go talk to the guy. So obviously this was in a very rural area in a small village of a Muslim country. Very hard to understand for many of us, but it is one of my favorite stories that I heard. I doubt this happens in many arranged marriages. But hey, it happened in at least once. And last year, too. Male Muslim here. Sorry for wall of text. Married less than a week ago and want to share laughing face. Hopefully someone manages to see this. Like a lot of the stories here, I guess it was technically arranged but not really. It was a rainy day when my family and I went to go meet my now waifu and family-in-law. It wasn't the bad kind of rainy though. The drizzle was light. The air was crisp, and even though there were clouds everywhere it felt kind of bright. When we were welcomed in and settled there were a few silly little things I noticed that actually perked me up a little. A Nintendo DS on their TV stand. Books like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings and Redwall in the shelves. A DuckTales DVD sitting on top of the player. The smell of fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies wafting from the kitchen. Of course this didn't necessarily mean anything, as the items could have belonged to anyone else in the home, but they were all things that spoke to me, and unfortunately they are things that many Muslims I met never seemed to be into. If they weren't things that the girl I was about to meet was into, then at least there was someone in this place that I had a connection with. We were seated for what couldn't have been more than a minute or two before her mother got up to get some refreshments and I guess check on her. My mom got up to help, but I'm pretty sure it was because there was a chance she could scope out my wife. In the middle of our idle chit-chat with her brother and father, I overheard her being introduced to my mother in the kitchen. My heart rate immediately went up because I knew she was going to be out soon and then all eyes would be on us. My mom was the first one to appear with a tray of South Asian sweets. Then her mom with some appetizers, samosas and spring rolls if you're wondering. And finally her with a plate of cookies. She was beautiful. I was surprised my jaw didn't hit the floor when she walked through the door. I had to practically peel my eyes away from her. Obviously I wanted to show that I am a good Muslim and tried not to look at her for longer than would be appropriate, but I found myself looking at her every chance I could because she's so beautiful. After being grilled a bit, the conversation switches to her and I'm ecstatic because I get a break and I can stare at her. Then we start getting into hobbies, likes, dislikes, and personality traits. They ask what I like to do in my free time. My response is a little vague because lots of video games isn't something they likely wanted to hear, but I do mention video games. Her mom groans that we would be a good match since she always has her face buried in her DS these days. We dive more into our personal hobbies and I bet I'm growing a dumb smile on my face because it's crazy how much we have in common. Her mom says something along the lines of how she still spends most of her time watching Disney and Nickelodeon. She gets a little annoyed and says that she doesn't spend all her time watching those channels when I pipe in and mention that that's all I ever really watch as well, aside from something like The Walking Dead. She smiles and turns towards me with a cute little half sheepish smile on her face, and we make real eye contact for the first time. It felt like an eternity and a millisecond all at once. We break it off and I can feel the heat emanating from my face. I'll fast forward since this is getting a little long. We get married. Our first moment of intimacy was probably after the wedding festivities had died down and we didn't have to meet and greet a billion people. During our honeymoon we went to an outdoor ice skating rink. She had never been before, but I had, so I thought it might be fun for her to learn and me to teach. It's not very hard and she got the hang of it pretty quickly, and we had a good time just skating with her holding onto my arm and chatting away. After a little bit we decide to sit on the benches at the side of the rink. I step away to get hot chocolates for us to sip while we relax. One of her friends had tipped me off beforehand that she really likes Christmas peppermint drinks, so I made sure to get that and asked the guy to add extra whipped cream for her. I watched intently as she took her first sip and a smile drew across her face. I told her that I had heard that she really likes peppermint. She said that she did. I laughed and asked her if she also really likes whipped cream because it was all over her lips and nose. She giggled and rubbed her nose. I laughed and went back to people watching when she leaned over and kissed me on my cheek. I know a kiss on a cheek isn't much, but I absolutely melted and was a little speechless while she just giggled at the whipped cream on my cheek and said that it should be gone now. Not one to miss a cliché opportunity. I let her know that she missed a spot and leaned in for our first kiss. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't strange. It was just an amazing moment. We might have had an arranged marriage, but we also had the time to develop into a relationship. From a Muslim standpoint, I had an arranged marriage, but it really wasn't all that arranged. I met my wife through a family friend. We were introduced. Our families were introduced, and we spent about a year getting to know each other. Both of us, at either point, could have decided we were not interested, but we fell very much in love and got married. We discussed sex, contraception, etc. prior to getting married, so it wasn't a foreign topic. When we finally ended up having sex day after our wedding night, we were way too exhausted that night. We took our time and went slow. It was very much enjoyable for both of us, and we have sex nearly daily now a year in. We were both virgins and had zero experience doing anything sexual with the opposite sex. Looking back now, I am really glad I got to experience all of that with her and only her. It makes it that much more special to me.